A real-world, Daedalus-class interstellar space mission carries an estimated, staggering price tag of $174 trillion. In the cinematic universe of Project Hail Mary, astronaut Ryland Grace attempts to solve an existential crisis without ever worrying about that kind of budget. His journey is orchestrated by Eva Stratt, an official wielding unilateral UN authority to seize global assets and completely bypass international law. That level of state-enforced logistical dictatorship is highly effective for storytelling. Actual aerospace entrepreneurs, however, operate under the rigid mathematical constraints of capital markets. Before building a single rocket, a founder has to establish a legal structure. You cannot launch a commercial enterprise using eminent domain. This diagram shows the fundamental accounting equation that governs all legal entities: assets equal liabilities plus owner's equity. Every piece of space hardware has to be funded by one of those two sources. We see this balance manipulated across three viable entity options: a publicly traded corporate entity pulling from shareholders, an international NGO gathering donations, or a public-private spaceport partnership mixing government and private funds. Whichever structure an entrepreneur selects, they still have to pay for the cost of capital to get their infrastructure off the ground. The first major hurdle is attracting investors willing to tolerate the extreme time delays of deep space returns. This equation maps out the required rate of return. Private capital markets demand regular compensation, often in the form of interstellar bonds that pay out continuous coupon payments while the mission is still in transit. Government funding looks entirely different. This line graph illustrates the triangular distribution pattern, typical of historical initiatives like the Apollo program, where public funding hits a sharp peak during development and then rapidly declines. Alternatively, we can look at this flat rectangular pattern. This represents sustained institutional consortiums, where long-term public funding is distributed evenly across decades of research. Whether pulling from sovereign wealth or private equity, the ability to acquire capital is strictly bound by the timeline of the mission and the investor's tolerance for risk. Once the capital is secured, the enterprise has to secure legal permission to leave the atmosphere. Under Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty, national governments bear international responsibility for the actions of their private commercial space actors. This translates to a heavy domestic regulatory burden. A returning vessel, for instance, must pass stringent NASA planetary protection standards to ensure no alien microbes back contaminate the Earth. Some private operators attempt to bypass strict FAA launch compliance by license shopping in states with lax oversight, a practice known as flying under flags of convenience. Cutting those legal corners does not accelerate a timeline. It leaves the entire multi-billion-dollar enterprise vulnerable to immediate shutdown by international authorities. We can see exactly how these funding frameworks and regulatory hurdles shape physical spacecraft today. SpaceX relies on billions in venture capital to develop Starship, prioritizing rapid iteration and full reusability to drive down long-term costs. That private equity model resulted in the Falcon 9, which brought the price of a single launch down to just $67 million. By contrast, NASA's Artemis program utilizes the triangular government funding model. It commands a $93 billion budget, resulting in a significantly higher cost per lunar landing. Meanwhile, India's space agency executed the Chandrayaan-3 lunar mission for an unprecedented $74 million, utilizing an ultra-lean institutional approach. The financial structure of the organization dictates the engineering outcomes on the launch pad.
Before we break down how Eva Stratt bypassed every corporate law on Earth to fund the Hail Mary mission, let's talk about your real-world foundation. Hollywood makes it seem like you can just seize global assets to launch a high-stakes project. But in reality, funding an ambitious venture requires an ironclad corporate structure. Most entrepreneurs try to launch their big ideas as a sole proprietor, and that is exactly why one failed prototype, a breached contract, or a liability claim could instantly wipe out their personal savings and home. To protect yourself from catastrophic risk, your business absolutely must be a separate legal entity. That's where Northwest Registered Agent comes in. Northwest is the absolute best formation service out there for serious privacy. For just $39 plus state fees, they handle your entire LLC setup and include a full year of their premium registered agent service. Their standout feature is privacy by default. They use their own business address on all your state filings to keep your home address completely off the public record. This legal shield is non-negotiable. I've linked my full Northwest review in the description. Use my link down below to register your LLC today and unlock exclusive discounts and perks. Get your protection handled first, and then let's get into the sci-fi.
Deep space exploration forces a choice between the stability of public fiat and the agility of private equity. Public governments can absorb massive financial risks to build long-term scientific goods, like space telescopes, but those projects frequently suffer from bloated budgets and misallocated resources. Private capital is highly efficient, but it faces the weight equation, the paralyzing reality that future technological advancements will likely render today's expensive investments completely obsolete before they ever reach their destination. Getting to another star requires balancing the guaranteed capital of the public sector with the lean, iterative efficiency of private markets. Returning to the fiction of Project Hail Mary, we see a story where human survival trumps all economic law. In reality, putting a lone astronaut in space requires an invisible, interlocking network of investors, compliance lawyers, and risk actuaries. The cinematic model removes the friction of externalized supply chain shocks and the inescapable realities of balance sheet accounting. True aerospace innovation is not funded by benevolent dictators or the threat of a dying sun. It is funded and strictly constrained by the accounting equation.